Today, I want to cover a couple of stories that shocked me, and I read the news every day. To help me go through those and other big stories, I have Monica Paige Luisi. Monica, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Stephen. It's such a pleasure.
So just some background so my audience knows a little bit more about you. Monica is a journalist with experience at OAN, Newsmax, Daily Mail, Turning Point USA. She's going to be at Charlie Kirk's big event, AmFest, at the end of December. You are right now, I guess, privileged or burdened, you'll have to let me know, by the ability to cover the White House there in the Washington, D.C. area. I like to get insider information. I just had Simon Atiba from the White House on last week. What is it like to be covering the Washington, D.C. news right there in either the heartland or the swamp, depending on your perspective?
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, it's unlike anything that I've ever experienced before in my life. I mean, I've worked in New York City, I've worked in San Diego, and there's just something about Washington, D.C. that really puts me at the forefront of just the action. And, you know, if you're really into politics, this is where you want to be. And the White House is just an adventure every single day. Unfortunately, I was covering a Joe Biden White House, which doesn't have as much action as a Trump White House, from what I've been told. I have yet to cover the Trump White House, so I'm very excited to do so come January. But what was really interesting was when I was covering Joe Biden, we were covering him when he was actually the candidate. We were covering him based on reports of his mental acuity declining, and just seeing him in real life on the South Lawn or walking from the White House to his Marine One or vice versa, and just analyzing him and seeing the cognitive decline in real time and seeing how he just doesn't take any questions and then trying to go to the press briefings and not getting called on. So there were a lot of frustrations working in a Joe Biden White House that I felt were, a little bit isolating as somebody, or as for an administration that wants to elevate voices and is so diverse and inclusive, right? And prides itself on inclusivity, but is not very inclusive to conservative or differing views. It just makes the job a little bit more difficult, but definitely was quite an adventure during that time. And it was an awesome time to be covering an election. That was my first election that I've ever covered politically. So it was very exciting just through and through, no matter what your political beliefs are. But it's definitely an exciting time. And all eyes are on January at this point. Inauguration Day is definitely going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it will. I think, depending on if you listen to the mainstream media or not, you might be excited about a Trump administration. If you do listen to the mainstream, you might be terrified. I read yesterday that 60% of Democrats are terrified of a Trump administration. I thought, when Biden took office, I wasn't terrified. I was just disappointed my candidate had lost. Then I went on to be terrified with everything he's been doing in Ukraine. And so we'll get into that. As you were covering the White House and Biden, did you start to notice the mental decline and the energy decline, or was it after his debate, like left-leaning media, that suddenly people went, "Oh, wait a minute, this guy might have dementia"?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, there are so many liberal and mainstream medias that felt like that debate night was, the come to, like, oh my gosh, what happened to Joe Biden? Well, if you've been watching him just for what it is, when you see the footage of him, when you see him falling down and you see him stumbling and bumbling and just mincing his words, it doesn't take somebody with a lot of brain cells to realize that this guy is not okay. And unfortunately, I have personally dealt with, and I'm sure many other people have dealt with, a family member who was mentally declining at one point. And this mirrors exactly that. Just how he would slur his words, the stiffened gait when he would walk, the masked face, the garbled speech. These are all signs of Parkinson's or dementia. I've interviewed countless different kinds of psychologists who specialize in brain function, and they cite these exact same examples, saying, when you see him, he's not really moving. He's moving kind of robotically. He doesn't have long strides when he walks. His speech is just very jumbled. You don't really understand. You can't paint a clear clear picture of what exactly he's saying, very emotionless, expressionless, physically on his face. These are all signs. And the fact that it took the debate to have people realize that is kind of startling. And these are the same people that vote, which also is kind of alarming as well, that if you can't see this for what it is, you need it to be shown to you firsthand. It's a little disturbing, but essentially I'm not entirely sure, because I've heard him speak recently and it sounded very different than the previous months that I've covered him. Like when he gave his farewell speech in the Rose Garden, he sounded great. I don't know where that came from. And he was all smiles that day as well. He doesn't really smile all that much. Usually it's out of spite to a question that maybe he doesn't like, but it was very interesting to see him that day and just compared to when we've seen him previously. So I don't know. I have a little conspiracy. Maybe, it's not shared by many people, but maybe other people could feel the same way. That could it have all been an act at this entire time? We don't truly know what happens behind the closed doors, which I think is very interesting. And I think it just paved the way for somebody like Kamala Harris to try and step in this previous election. So very interesting, and definitely something that should have been very concerning to a lot of people well before the debate.
Yeah. Well, I've read conspiracies that go as far as saying maybe they were poisoning him and now they stopped. I mean, I've read all kinds of stuff. I think that there was just this need to cover up his failing health in order to keep Donald Trump out of the White House. And now that it's happening, everybody's just like, oh, poor guy. Yeah. They've kind of moved on from the topic. But for years, I told my community, this guy has dementia. You can see it in the way that he talks and thinks. I want to move on to a different president. I wasn't shocked when Trump won, but I was shocked this week to hear former President Bill Clinton say he wasn't at all surprised that Donald Trump won because he has great policies and people like him. What are your thoughts on Bill Clinton, who's been so negative on Trump, suddenly saying, oh, I totally see why. And also, was he in trouble with Hillary Clinton later that night?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's laughable. It's also very humorous that Kamala Harris would use him as kind of like the surrogate to try and get voters for her this past election, saying, oh, Laken Riley wouldn't have been killed if these illegal immigrants are properly vetted. Oh, well, the economy was better under Trump. Like, he's just saying the quiet part out loud. And I think a lot of Democrats have finally turned the page on Kamala Harris and on the Democrats when they realized, oh my gosh, what happened to my savings? What happened to the crime rate in my cities? Americans are getting killed. We're entering World War III, ? All of these things that just weren't happening under President Trump, now happening under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And I'm sure that they really weren't buying what Kamala was selling because she's been the vice president. She hasn't done anything. And after she conceded the race, which this is also interesting, she still had time to do the things that she said that she was going to do, and she still didn't do them. So if that's all you need to know about the Democrat Party nowadays. They're always running on change. Where's the change? You're not doing what you say you're going to do.
Oh my gosh, you just made my brain, like, I didn't think about that. Like, okay, you've had 3.5 years. You say you're going to do all this future stuff. Republicans are saying, why are you going to do it in the future? Why didn't you already do it? And then now she has this like 90-day window to get those things done. And what does she do? She goes to Hawaii for a week and she still doesn't do them. Like, why wouldn't Biden and Harris try to go out on a high note and lower gas prices, lower interest rates, make life affordable, and take the credit for it so that she can run for office again in the future? They're not doing it. Instead, they're trying to start World War III. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, now talking about Ukraine getting nukes, they are lowering gas prices by draining the SPR, which is such a cop-out way to lower prices. And, it's just keeping the borders the way it is, the way they are. I mean, you just saw recently a 2-year-old girl crossing the border by herself. In what world? I mean, you're just allowing sex trafficking, drug trafficking, record crime, and you're not doing anything to fix the problems that you say you want to fix. And also, there may be rumors that Kamala Harris wants to run again in 2028. We'll all remember this time 4 years back from 2028, where she just hasn't done anything. She went on vacation. She's a vacation from her vacation. Very interesting.
Well, in 4 years, if she runs, I'll be here to remind America that after she didn't win, she abandoned an entire party that was waiting for her to speak, that she abandoned the American people, that she abandoned the American border. I think Trump won because he had good policies and he articulated that. I also believe he won because people had nostalgia for the Trump era, and they believed that he would work hard to bring that back. 4 years from now, when we look back, we're not going to look back on Harris and Biden with nostalgia. Nobody's going to go, oh, I wish I could go back to COVID times. Oh, I wish I could go back to, 200% increase in my fuel costs, in my utility bills, interest rates jumping so high, housing going up so much. So I think that if she's hoping to get that nostalgia bump that Trump got, she's going to be in a bad position in a couple of years. Let's stay on the topic of her. You're there in Washington, D.C. I'm out here in Utah. I can't even begin to imagine what the energy is like down there. What is the energy around Kamala Harris and her future in politics?
I always like this question because I went to Kamala Harris's concession speech to cover that and just get a feel for, what is going on here? Like, what are the people feeling? It was pretty crowded. It was at Howard University, of course. And there were a lot of people on the ground that, everyone was pretty young, and it was a pretty diverse crowd, of course. Everyone's just kind of feeling defeated. They felt kind of solemn, like this was, but they really thought that this was their moment. They really, truly thought that Kamala Harris could beat President Trump. They were convinced that this was going to be the next president, Kamala Harris. And, they felt defeated. They felt angry. They felt kind of remorseful. But I don't really think that they felt very violent. Like I wasn't really feeling like these people were going to cause any chaos afterwards. They weren't going to revolt, which was very surprising. We haven't seen any protests the night of the election. There were no angry protesters. There maybe have been like a small handful of what I could say, because I was also at Lafayette Park covering those protests as well. Not many people came out to protest the election results. I saw a couple of people after her concession speech crying. That includes men, grown men, crying, real tears streaming down their faces, which was wild to me. And it was just very, very, calm, quiet, and it's been very eerily quiet here in DC. There have been very small little protests, about a dozen or so people protesting Israel. These are the pro-jihad, pro-Palestinian people who protest outside the White House. They try to get Joe Biden's attention somehow. They really think that they're doing something like that, but anything else, it's been too quiet. And I know that a couple of other White House reporters share that same sentiment right now. But I think this is the calm before the storm. Personally, I'm predicting Inauguration Day to be a lot of protests, whether it's at the Capitol or at the White House. They have the entire front of the White House closed down. They're actually building the inauguration stage over there as well. They got a really early start on it, Stephen. They got started on it probably late September, which is probably the earliest that they've ever started the construction of that. And I can't remember, when they started the construction of it in 2020, given that it was a COVID year. I don't know what was normal back then, is normal then. But we're just kind of bracing for that. I think there's a reason why they started the stage construction early, given the election and the climate currently. But very, very interesting. I think January, all eyes are going to be on January. I don't think there's going to be a dull moment during that month. Okay.
Democrat super donor John Morgan from the law firm Morgan & Morgan, he shared with Chris Cuomo that he begged top Democrats not to run Kamala. He said she will lose before she even starts. He says her political career needs to be over, and she needs to quit begging donors for money just because she's $20 million in debt. What are your thoughts on his comments?
I think he's right. I mean, she ran that campaign into the ground. She tried to pull out all the stops. She tried to mobilize like crazy in all the key battleground and swing states. She had her advertisement on the Sphere in Vegas. Like, she really tried to do everything that she could, and she ended up in millions of dollars in debt. I'm waiting for Democrats to start pulling out Michelle Obama. I really thought that they were going to use her this past election cycle, but I definitely think that they still want to play the woman card. They still want to play the minority card. And I'm really waiting for somebody like AOC. I'm waiting for somebody like Michelle Obama, this real progressive push. But the thing is that Democrats don't realize that the farther left they go, the more they lose people. People really aren't, there's a very, very small area of Democrats that are extremely far left. And you kind of lose them, especially with the Muslim vote. I feel like was a really huge factor this past election. When you've got the Muslim vote in Michigan, you've got these small pockets in Chicago as well that abandoned Kamala Harris, and they don't want to see somebody like her run again. So I'm very interested to see who the Democrats are going to pull out in the next 4 years.
Okay. Yeah, I can't imagine trying to fundraise after losing an election. I just like, wow, that is like pulling your own teeth.
Yeah, that's a bad look.
There in DC, what is the energy around President Biden kind of out of nowhere approving Ukraine to attack Russia with American money and American weapons? Tucker Carlson said yesterday he believes there is a dark energy guiding the White House. I've had retired Colonel John Mills on. He believes that Biden bit off more than he can chew, didn't think that Putin would have such a strong reaction. Others are saying this isn't Biden at all. He's just checked out. It's the administration. What's the energy around this big story?
Yeah, there are a lot of factors, I feel like. I mean, you've hit on all of them. And obviously the elephant in the room is that, and this is just the same talking point that everybody says, is that this wouldn't have happened if Trump were president. But I think it's interesting that this is happening now, the timing of it. There are no coincidences. This happening now, right before Trump is taking office, speaks volumes to who this president or this administration is. I mean, President Trump spoke separately with Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, working out these peace deals, and now Joe Biden wants to go in reverse. He's authorizing the use of these ATACMS deep into the heart of Russia, where Russia has warned, if you do this, the U.S. is a direct participant in this war. Why would you want that? The mood on the ground, to answer your question, is totally split. I mean, you've got people on one side who love Ukraine. They cannot get enough of the funding for Ukraine. We need Ukraine to win this war. They're still calling for more money to Ukraine, more aid, etc. all these years later. And then you just have this other sector of people who are like myself, who are just so fed up with this funding. They want the end to the war. I've been seeing some posts online circulating on social media where there might be this protest or this demonstration on December 7th to, protest war, these ongoing wars, that we're sick of this playing out as long as it has been. Where has the president been? Where has this administration been? We don't have leadership. What's our defense secretary doing? Remember, Lloyd Austin left his post and nobody knew where he went. He was in the hospital and the American people were left in the dark. These are the kinds of people that are running our country, and it's scary. So it's almost as if, Stephen, nobody is home. Who's guiding us? I genuinely don't know. I wish I knew, being at the White House, but these are real questions that everyday people really are asking and should have answers to.
Yeah. You're younger than me, so I don't know if you know this movie reference, but this kind of reminds me of this movie called Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. The babysitter dies, and then you have these teenagers like trying to run a household. They go get jobs, all because they don't want to admit to mom, who's on a business trip for 6 months, that the babysitter has died. Like, I feel like that's what's going on. People reference the movie Weekend at Bernie's, but I just feel like everyone at the White House is like trying to pretend like Joe Biden isn't like mentally checked out. You said something, and I don't know if you meant it this way, but I think it's actually true. You said there are some people that love Ukraine. They can't get enough of the funding.
Yeah.
I don't ever hear the people that support Ukraine saying, we love the people of Ukraine.
Right.
We love their city. We love their culture, their civilization. It's always about the money.
Right.
And my worry is these members of Congress, their job is to flow money back to jobs and companies that donate to them. And I feel like it's just this giant toxic circle. The only person I've really heard say kind things about Ukraine was actually Donald Trump, surprisingly. When he gets on with Zelensky, he's like, listen, let's save your beautiful people, your cities with their golden domes. Let's rebuild. He's the only one talking about Ukraine as a culture and a civilization, where everyone else, including some Republicans, they only talk about it as a way to flow money back to American jobs.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said to that. You know, President Trump, he always has a keen eye to detail in the things that he says. There's a method to everything that he says. And, you know, it's smart to talk about a war-torn country in this way, where you are focused on the goals. You're not focused on the dollar signs. You're focused on what can those dollar signs, how can they help my country, which is in the middle of a war, right? And, you know, it's also, this is something that I figure is just so bizarre to me, is that Joe Biden and his family members were involved in that scheme with Ukraine for quite some time, with this money laundering scheme. And I think there's something to that, where we keep giving money to Ukraine, this open-ended fund, this endless bankroll to Ukraine. I feel like there might be a tie to those business dealings with Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, and Ukrainian officials that actually, I think OAN uncovered that many years ago, and it was just buried under the table. I don't really know, you know, no media outlets picked that up. But when Hunter Biden was going through all those business dealings and those court cases and those lawsuits and show me the money, let's see the receipts, that quickly died out of the news cycle, by the way. And I think there's something to be said about that and this endless funding for Ukraine, whether that money is going towards rebuilding or whether it's going into somebody's pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be sad? Like, we die, we get to the afterlife, and then we learn that Biden spent over $200 billion of American money to cover his family's sins in Ukraine. Over 1 million beautiful Ukrainian people died. 10 million fled for their lives into other European nations, all to cover up a crime. And, you know, I think you might be onto something, because as I've covered that story, as soon as that started to get any kind of traction, they immediately jumped on the fact that not that Hunter Biden illegally sold out his country to make money with foreign countries, but that he didn't pay taxes on it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it became an IRS collection story. And that's where the mainstream media went, was all of a sudden, oh, we don't care that he cheated America. We care that he cheated the IRS. Do you think that was kind of weird?
Yeah, I mean, I think the entire thing is weird. I think that him sitting on a Ukrainian gas board, even though he knows nothing about Ukrainian energy, is weird. I think all of it is. I feel like there wasn't enough media coverage on it. I feel like we still don't know any answers regarding what came out of that. And honestly, I think that that's exactly what the news cycle wants, is that just one crisis after another, they each overshadow each other, so we'll never truly know the truth about any of it.
Yeah. All right. I said that there was a couple of shocking things at the opening. In the last 24 hours, so you know how Trump is Hitler and his voters are Nazis and democracy's in danger? And then Trump won and democracy worked and his voters weren't so bad. And Trump is tough, but will manage. It's all kind of like reversed on itself. But Whoopi Goldberg shocked me on The View by kind of chewing Ann Navarro out and the audience, saying that you lose credibility when you say these horrible things about Trump, who he is, what he'll do, and then he doesn't, and then gives the example of, you know, he wasn't Hitler. Do you think that she is onto something? Like, when you go that far and that negative and that cruel, don't you just kind of end up losing credibility as a news deliverer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, when you're going to say these things and you don't have evidence to back it up, you lose credibility even more. I think when you use these kinds of rhetoric and these kind of words, you oversaturate them. I mean, we've been hearing Trump Nazi, Trump white supremacist, Trump Hitler, And now those words don't have an effect on people anymore. We've just repeated them so many times that they lose their meaning at the end of the day. And, the left wants to say Trump is Hitler, Trump's a dictator, is a fascist, but is promising a peaceful transfer of power. Joe Biden all smiles when Trump came to the White House, shaking his hand, talking with him, taking pictures with him. That's not something that somebody would do if they really thought their political opponent was a danger and a threat to democracy and was actually Hitler. So these people have just been spewing these talking points for years. And it's all part of this media manipulation to brainwash the American people. That's all these outlets have been doing for years, pushing this agenda just so they can get more views and get clicks and go viral and say the next best powerful thing to gain more headlines and get more money from all these big corporations. So this is all just like a whole snowball effect of just things that people just really don't care about anymore. They see the results of President Trump. They see more money in their bank accounts. They're seeing less wars, less funding for these wars, and just a better lifestyle overall. And I'm still waiting on the rights that I'm losing as a woman now that Trump is back. I mean, I don't know why these people, or these women especially, that feel like they're going to lose their rights because Trump is back. What rights are you losing? I mean, to make this a gender issue as well as something else that the left loves to use as well. It's just such a non-argument and just so overplayed and oversaturated.
Yeah. Well, he's so against women that he made his chief of staff a woman.
Yeah.
He's so against women. He made the head of all of the intelligence agencies a woman. He's so against women. He made the attorney general a woman. Anyway, I don't know. I'm just a guy in Utah delivering the news. What do I know? Yeah. Okay. What is the energy there in DC around Trump's promise to do this deportation campaign? You've got a lot of ultra liberal mayors and governors saying we're going to fight for illegal immigrants to stay in the country. Now you have Tom Homan and lawyers saying we're going to arrest you. You will be removed from office. You literally can't go against the federal government and our mandate to keep America safe. What's the energy there in DC around that?
Well, DC it's got to be one of the bluest cities in the country. I mean, only 7%, I was one of the 7%, voted for Donald Trump here in DC, which is very funny to me. But the mood on the ground is they are not excited about it. Even before President Trump, before the election this past year, and before Kamala Harris was assumed the Democrat nominee, there were protesters outside the White House, I think just this past October or so, where they were protesting ICE. They don't want ICE. They say down with ICE, let people free into the country. I forget what exactly the chant was, but they were just out there for quite some time. I think it was around October 7th, actually. That was when a bunch of protests were happening, and that was one of them. And they are not a fan of this deportation. They want everybody to come in here and just have the government fund them. I have actual, American veterans and American homeless kicked out on the street. So these illegal aliens can take our, these hotels and be in our communities and really just not contribute anything positive to it, unfortunately, because that's what really happens at the end of the day. They take the government handouts. It's a real shame that they cannot come into this country legally. And I'm really glad that somebody like Tom Homan is going to take charge and make sure that everyone's coming in here the right way, like our ancestors did. And, I speak to some of the Uber drivers who are originally not from this country, and they say that they are very fed up with the illegal immigration because it took these people years to come in legally. This is where they come in from, Pakistan, or they come from India, or they just come from different parts of the world. And they waited years on that line to come in through that long, tedious process. And just to see the floodgates open, they're like, wow, I wish that could happen for me. That's not really fair. But that's not the American dream that people remember. And real Americans see that and they're discouraged. They want a prosperous future for their children and they want a safe community for others. And I'm really very much looking forward to what Tom Homan does in the immigration department.
Yeah. So I lived through that exact scenario that you just described. I was for work. I was down in Las Vegas, and I was in an Uber, and there was a flag I didn't recognize. So I asked the driver, "Oh, where are you from? Where's this flag from?" "Oh, from Albania." He told me all the history of Albania. Anyway, he says, out of nowhere, "We need Donald Trump back in office. I'm so sick of these illegals. My family fought so hard to get here. And now we're trying to build a business, and I'm doing Uber on the side in order to bring in extra money. And I'm being undercut by people that didn't fight to get here." And so it's really interesting.
It is. And I was seeing reports recently that a lot of these illegal aliens are from China. They were they're these military age Chinese men who coming in here. What are they doing here? What's the goal? And is it, to kind of disrupt our system and society and the way that we're living in? Is it to cause technological warfare? What are the goals of these people coming in here? They're not coming here for a better life. I mean, some of them are, God bless them, but a lot of them really aren't. So you really question what's going on here. And it's really disturbing.
Yeah. I had a retired colonel point two things out to me. Number one, he said, none of these people escape China without China's permission. So China knows that of all the countries that are coming in, 150 different countries, China specifically, they know every single person they give permission to leave mainland China. He said that is a little bit curious to him. He said the last thing that is scary to him as someone in the military is more military-aged men have come into the country than there are people serving in the military. And he said it's actually a 6-to-1 ratio. So there's 6 illegal immigrants of military age for every 1 person in the U.S. military here on the homeland.
Wow.
So hopefully there's nothing nefarious that we're not aware of, but it'll be really interesting to see as Trump is sworn in on the Bible, what his first moves are, his first phone calls, and then I believe he's going to release that bulldog, Tom Homan, on ICE and Border Patrol, and it's going to be really, really interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to all the progress that Trump makes and tries to reverse everything that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have done as quickly as possible, because you only got 4 years to do it, and believe it or not, 4 years is not long enough.
Yeah. Well, Monica, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a delightful conversation. If people want to follow you online, what is the best place for them to go?
Sure. Well, you can follow me on Instagram at the Mon Father, and you can follow me on X at Monica Paige TV. Those are my 2 social media platforms. I'm very responsive to all of the messages that I get, and that's where I usually post most of my work. So thank you so much for the opportunity, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. I'll put a direct link down below, and I might see you at AmFest, Turning Point USA's big event in late December. So again, thank you for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too, and happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you.